All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone who's joined us today for this webinar that we hope to be the first in a series of webinars and other learning opportunities that we at What Works Cities hope to be able to share with our community over the coming weeks and months related to the COVID-19 response and recovery efforts. Appreciate you all joining us here on this Friday afternoon and hope you're doing as well as you can be in your respective communities. So today we have the honor of hosting the team from the U.S. Digital Response organization that launched recently in the wake of the crisis with a focus on helping local, state, and federal government partners respond to the crisis at hand and the needs they were seeing in their community. So today we will have at the top just walk you through a little bit of housekeeping as well as an introduction for those of you who may not be familiar with What Works Cities. And then we're going to turn it over to the U.S. Digital Response team. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for a question and answer period. Some of you submitted questions ahead of time, so we will endeavor to get to all of those, and then hopefully we'll have some time for folks to share or ask questions that arise during the webinar today. And then at the end, we will share some additional resources, both from the What Works Cities team, and then we are also joined with by colleagues from the National League of Cities today, who will also talk to you briefly about some of the resources that they have for cities and local government over the next few weeks and months to come. Next slide, please. So just as a matter of housekeeping up front, this webinar is being recorded. We will share the slides with folks who have registered to attend afterwards, as well as additional resources to all of the registered attendees. If you have questions throughout the webinar as they come up, please just leave them in the chat box. So our team is working to curate those so that we can hopefully get you answers real time. And if for some reason we run out of time, we'll be sure to follow up with you to try to get you an answer. So just a brief introduction of What Works Cities, and I should introduce myself. My name is Clarence Wardell. I am the Director of City Solutions at Results for America, supporting the What Works Cities initiative. So What Works Cities initiative was launched in 2015 by Bloomberg Philanthropies as a way to support local government across the country, specifically focused at the time on mid-sized cities to better use data and evidence to effectively tackle their most pressing challenges and improve residents' lives. We do that through three primary buckets. One is setting a national standard of excellence for what it means for local governments to use data and evidence effectively. We connect cities with world-class experts and partners to advance their use of data-informed government. And then lastly, we have built a network of practitioners and experts to share their insights with the community, of which many of you have been a part of over the years. And if you haven't, we invite you to join and hopefully take advantage of some of those resources. Just a brief overview. So What Works Cities is a collective partnership of 5 organizations. As I mentioned, I support the Results for America team, but we are also in collaboration across a lot of this work with 4 other organizations, the Behavioral Insights team, North America, which works with cities on low-cost evaluations and in many cases, small-scale randomized control trials to better understand how interventions are working or not within communities. The Harvard Kennedy School's Government Performance Lab, which works with cities on performance-based contracting and various, provides various resources around procurement of services and programs at the local level. The Johns Hopkins University Government Excellence Center team that works with cities across the country on building out their data capabilities within government, as well as the performance management capabilities. And then also the Sunlight Foundation, which works with cities on open data and their use of open data to communicate with residents within the city. Our kind of central program here, if you will, is our certification program, which I mentioned before. A lot of our work is around setting the standard for what it means for a local government to effectively use data and evidence. So we launched the What Works City certification program a few years back. We've since announced 2 rounds of certified cities. As you can see here, we have 3 tiers: What Works Cities Platinum, Gold, and Silver. And those cities that you see there are ones that we have evaluated across a set of 45 criteria across several core capabilities to have been identified as those who have been the best at using data and evidence within local government operations. Throughout the year, we also support other cities who you don't see on this list who are striving to improve their capabilities through some of the resources that I mentioned before. So if you're not familiar with What Works Cities, we would invite you, please send us an email to get connected. We'd love to chat with you or your city about how we can support, or just visit the website, it's whatworkscities.org, to learn more about the opportunities that we offer. So with that, I would like to introduce, and really this is in the vein of a lot of our work, and that is, again, connecting cities and local government with the resources that they need to thrive, both in normal, kind of quote unquote, normal operations times, but certainly during crisis times in which the city's capacities are stretched to the limit, and as many of you are engaged in right now, trying to respond to the multitude of requests from your residents in your community. And so today, we wanted to set up this opportunity for to introduce to you a group of folks that, several of whom have been former colleagues of mine, others who I'm just getting the opportunity to meet, but really an all-star group of folks who have put together, and I saw an opportunity in the wake of the COVID crisis to galvanize a large swath of support, volunteer support, and folks who wanted to channel their technical capabilities and efforts into responding to the crisis, and to help organize those resources and deliver those and work with local, state, and federal government on projects. And so the U.S. Digital Response Team was formed, like I said, in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, with a focus on strengthening decision-making and supporting the ability of government to effectively deliver critical services to the public at scale. They're a volunteer-run, nonpartisan effort, as I said, works across all levels of government. And we really wanted to bring and introduce them to you today to talk specifically about their efforts on how they can engage with and work with local government partners. And so we have the honor of being joined this afternoon by the Chief Executive Officer of U.S. Digital Response Group, Ms. Raylene Young, who's recent fellow with Aspen Institute's Tech Policy Hub, and prior to that, she was an engineering and product executive at Stripe and Facebook. So she brings a wealth of experience from the technical side to this space, as well as understanding how you can leverage technology and those types of supports from the public services and public sector space. So with that, I'd like to introduce Raylene and turn it over to you.
Great, thank you for the introduction, and thanks everyone for being here. I know there's a lot of things competing for your time, so really hope we can help answer any questions you might have. Next slide. So as you heard, U.S. Digital Response is a volunteer-run, nonpartisan organization started by former deputy CTOs of the U.S. and many seasoned tech industry veterans. I say organization in that knowing it is just about 1 month old, so it's been formed very quickly, and we really came together based on what we were seeing in terms of the impact the crisis was having on governments across the country. So we provide a service that really matches city, county, and state governments, including, we're also in touch with federal agencies as well, with the volunteers, services, or just advice that can help support them through the COVID-19 response. So at this point, we've actually sourced more than 3,500 experienced professionals, primarily with skills in technology, communications, and operations, who are all willing to help however they can, and often they respond kind of on a moment's notice. So far, we've already matched volunteers and gotten help to dozens of states and cities across the country. And this kind of gives you a sense for what we do. It's really, we receive requests, we have skilled volunteers that we work with, we have an internal process where we do some pretty careful matchmaking, but really a lot of it's around collaboration of our volunteers with the governments and city employees who need the help. Next slide. So you might be wondering, how does this actually work for governments? So, in a very straightforward way, there's an online form that people go to and fill out. So you go to our website, you fill out the form, it includes information like what are the kinds of things you need help with, who's the right person to contact. And someone from our government partnerships team will actually reach out and schedule a call with you within 24 hours. So after we talk to you and we understand your needs, we actually bring that back to the team to figure out what's the right way to get you the help that's most suited. So there are three main ways that we provide help. One is to actually just increase staffing. And one of our partners in New Jersey described it as, we were doubling the size of their team. Another way is just to connect you with existing tools that are free, they're effective, They're ones we might actually know more about in terms of like being in touch with the team or giving them feedback. And we can just kind of get those connections made quickly. And finally, in some cases, we might build some new things, and we are really trying to build, kind of take a more platform approach. It's open source software. It's things that will kind of not only help build, but may also, in many cases, help the cities themselves learn how to use the tools and kind of hand over anything to them. In terms of some of the logistics, I would say, because it kind of has a variety of ways that we try to help, we do have a team on our side and a partner, someone on our side that's designated to be your partner as a city official or government official. So while you might start off needing help in staffing for 1 week, the following week you might want to know about a tool that we can offer, or you might even need something that we can help build that doesn't exist. So the idea is we're creating these ongoing relationships with government partners, and we're really here to help however we can throughout the crisis. Next slide. So we know this is a new model, and it probably helps to just share a little bit more around some concrete examples of things that we've been working with cities on. So here's an example from the city of San Rafael. I just noticed her handle is What Up San Rafael. It's awesome. And I'll tell you a little story about how we help them digitize a lot of their processes. So in general, lots of cities all over the country have employees that are needing to work remotely for the first time. And that might just be an entire department, hundreds of people who used to go to the office, print out forms, and have to handle them personally, to trying to work remotely. And I think that's a big challenge that we're seeing. So with the city of San Rafael, what we did was we had 3 volunteers just really go to talk to the city and understand in this one department what they were trying to do and like how we could help. So next slide. So what this looked like, it wasn't necessarily just like, hey, here's a tool you can use. It actually was a much more in-depth process of looking at the actual forms and processes that the city of San Rafael was needing to handle, specifically in HR and finance, and synthesizing all of those requirements and like what they were doing, and then actually kind of designing a new workflow that could work well with off-the-shelf software tools that already existed. So of course, this was a multi-step process and something that took a lot of discussion and collaboration with the city's team. And actually, as mentioned here, it wasn't overnight. I think employees had to move overnight, but this was actually an iterative process. And by next week, a lot of these new digital workflows will be live. And not only will it help hundreds of employees stay at home and stay safe, but they've also helped train people on new tools that they maybe weren't familiar with before. Next slide. So, we know right now that city employees everywhere are overworked, and I think the risk of burnout is very high. And so something that, we're especially happy to help provide is, not only that help kind of in the moment, maybe like with the actual kind of processes that you're dealing with, the work that you're facing, in this hour, in this day, but we can also be a resource to help the teams kind of step back and look at something that might be solved more like from a systems perspective, or something that can actually be like a redesign of things that you're doing today. So we're more than happy to just be a thought partner in things that you're already doing or would like to do. So next slide. So another common theme, especially one that we've heard from cities, is the need and really desire to help mobilize volunteers in your own communities. So, we start off with a strong like technology background, but we realize that a lot of the work that needs to be done is happening between people in the same neighborhood, in the same city, on the same block. And so this request first came to us from the city of Concord in California, where they approached us with a problem around trying to get more food to homebound senior citizens. And they have a Meals on Wheels program, but it was hard to know how they could expand that and really get in touch with all of the volunteers that wanted to raise their hand for this purpose. So next slide. So what we did was we built a product called Neighbor Express, and you can we showed it in the previous slide, but it basically lets volunteers sign up online, which is very accessible to all, and enables the city to match volunteers in the back end. But what we quickly saw was what we did for Concord, California was actually something that many other cities could make use of. And we quickly got requests from another city, Walnut Creek, California, which is launched. And later this week, we're launching in a city in New Jersey. Because the team is, our team is technical, is building these tools, but a lot of the people we want to work with who do volunteer matching may not have engineers on their team who can help customize the site. So this is a diagram that kind of shows you what we did. What we actually decided to do was build everything in a very modular way. So this is a diagram that enables every city to customize the actual look and feel of the websites that we help build for them. So for example, and this it can be anything from the types of volunteers to even like the languages that we feature. So one example is in Concord, we needed to have it be in 2 languages primarily, but in New Jersey, the second city we're working with, it's actually no longer focused on like delivery of, meals to homebound citizens. It's in fact more focused on grocery delivery and actually needs to be in twice as many languages. So we've helped kind of extend that to easily work in 4 languages at once. And I think what's neat about this approach is it's kind of more like giving the rest, kind of sharing the recipe rather than building the tool end to end. And even though we've worked directly with 3 US cities now, there's been another 10 cities around the world who had already built some version of this on their own and are actually reaching out for advice on how they can scale their solution. Next slide. So, in the end, what really matters here is the impact that people are having in the communities. And I think this city of Concord is the first city we launched with. We hope there will be many more, but already we've helped, and Neighbor Express has helped facilitate hundreds of deliveries already. And I think it's really having an impact on the local community. So we're really happy to be able to help in that area. Next slide. So another big thing that's coming up really across the country is thinking about insights. And what I mean by that is modeling, forecasting, just understanding where the cases are, how they're spreading, which hospitals have resources, and so forth. So this has been a big area area that we want to help with. And one thing, I'll give a couple examples here. One example is actually this tool called COVID Act Now. It actually was a completely independent, separate volunteer-driven effort where they built a tool, a team of data scientists, engineers, designers, working very closely with epidemiologists, public health officials, and actually legislators to help build their own kind of standalone tool that provided basic case modeling and prediction. So once we heard about it, we became close partners of the team. And at this point, we help not only sometimes give them feedback from what we're hearing on the ground, but we also help get it in front of more government groups. So what this does is it enables leaders to quickly answer questions such as, what will be the impact in my region, and when can I expect it, and when can I look at these curves and understand if it's flattening or not. The neat thing is this team has really been growing and running ahead, and they've iterated very quickly, and it started off with just state level data. So you would look kind of at California in aggregate, but now, as you can see from the map, they've actually launched a county level granularity of data. So now you can look county by county and see the impact. And I think this team is just really great and has been iterating very quickly and continues to add new ways to understand the data and new data sources. Next slide. So for a different example of how we've been able to help, or ways that we can try to help, is a much more consultative approach. So with COVID Act Now, I mentioned that's really in some ways an off-the-shelf tool. It works, it's built on its own, and we're just helping get it in front of more people. With this project I want to share, it's really about meeting the governments where they are. So, here's an example where we started working with the state of Pennsylvania, and the idea was could we help build some comprehensive dashboard for public health officials? But once we started talking to them, we realized that they have a lot built up already, which is true in probably most everywhere around the country, and no 2 systems look exactly the same. So when working with them, we realized that what the value we could provide was more as a SWAT team, or kind of a consultative partnership, where we come in, we understand what you're doing, and we just find ways that we can either speed along things you already have planned, or maybe remove manual work. So here's an example where the state had been receiving hundreds of files of raw information from hospitals and counties around the state. but someone within that worked for the state had to spend out like half a day every day manually collating that data and kind of aggregating it in order to put it into a dashboard like this. So what we did was we actually just helped them automate that process. So nothing really changed in terms of how they were collecting the data from hospitals, but what we were trying to do is just give more firepower to the team inside. And once we did that, our team also helped improve their dashboards and kind of build new features on top of it. So this actually launched 2 days ago on Wednesday, and it's their Pennsylvania State's like new hospital preparedness database. So it shows the level of available ICU beds and ventilators by county. And the idea is, with this better information, they can figure out how to route more supplies or help. And because we have more of this SWAT team model, we're actually working with another state this week and are hoping and have capacity to take on more as more needs come up. Next slide. So in just a moment, that's kind of all the prepared materials I had, and we'll move into Q&A where I'm happy to share more specific examples. But first, I just wanted to share a preview of a few of the things we're working on in case these resonate with what you're seeing. These are all projects that came in from requests that we were getting and have started staffing some volunteers on. In some cases, it's just to understand what's out there and maybe review existing services and tools. In other cases, we're in active development of basic web tools, or even just kind of like best practices and guides that might help might help government teams be more effective. So, one example is we've kind of seen this in every city and state, but communicating information about the crisis and resources that the city offers is something that every city is trying to do. So we have a project where we're trying to build a kind of like sample website or kind of guide to lay out your website that includes the information that's going to be most helpful to your residents and kind of a sort of a hierarchy of information. So that's just one example, but there's a lot more work to come here. And then with that, I'll turn it over to Clarence, and we'll do Q&A. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Raylene. That was very, very helpful. So as I mentioned before, we have a few questions that folks submitted ahead of time. But as we're going through these initial questions, and I've seen already a few pass in the chat box, if folks could, if you have other questions, please leave them there. We'll either, again, try to answer them live here or respond in the chat box as well. So just Raylene, one question that I had, just can you say a little bit about, I know when folks hear, technology volunteers, we're thinking a lot about engineers, data scientists and the like, but can you say a little bit more about, and I believe you guys have, something like 3,000 volunteers or so at the moment. Can you say a little bit more about the types of skill sets that are represented kind of in that pool of volunteers?
Yes, certainly. So we have, we started off definitely heavier in technology, data, digital. So I would say, the majority of people are coming from engineering, data science, data, product management, more of those skill sets. That said, our volunteer form, we look for almost all skill sets, and we have many listed, including public health, operations, supply chain expertise, marketing, communications, legal. And so at this point, I would say we have definitely volunteers representing all of those categories. The other thing that we're trying to do is, as we learn more about what people need, we will update the form and actually send out calls for new types of volunteers. So two quick examples was we realized that content and communication is so important in this crisis. I think the big thing a lot of people are struggling with, just how to find the right information and how to communicate it well. So we were short on content strategists, the people who are good at communications. We had a lot of engineers, but not as good communicators. So then we actually put out a call for more of those people, and we've had since then like dozens of people sign up and volunteer. So we try to be responsive, and at this point, I'd say it's a pretty comprehensive set of skills.
Great, thank you. One of the questions that came through ahead of time was focused around economic assistance. And I think the question was generally around with the CARES Act expanding pretty significantly the number of folks that were eligible for certain types of assistance that were not previously eligible. I think there's a question at the local level for how can cities help implement that and help guide folks to the right resources around their eligibility for economic assistance. Are there ways that you all are thinking about that? Have you partnered on that within that kind of realm just yet?
Yes, certainly. So I think there's a few projects we're working on. I think one big one is I think it's hard to understand what benefits you're eligible for, like as a resident, and especially with all of the things that are pandemic related or coming out of CARES. So we have a project that is working on building what is more like a I can't think of the word right now for some reason. Eligibility, that's the word I'm thinking of. Something that kind of helps people understand what they're eligible for. So we're in the process of building that. There's actually a live example that New Jersey built, and we are building kind of like a open source version that any state or city could adapt for their own use. And we think this is going to be actually very helpful for a lot of cities where a lot of it is just that first line of like answering questions and helping people understand what they're eligible for. So we have that. We can definitely share some links to that. And then in addition, we are also looking specifically at unemployment insurance and certain larger classes of benefits that we know right now are being in some ways overwhelmed by the number of applicants. And we're also looking kind of more end to end, like not only can we help people self-assess if they're eligible, but we're also trying to see if we can embed with government teams to help them kind of action those applications more quickly as well.
Got you. I think that's helpful. Kind of a related question, one you alluded to before. I think there were a lot of questions ahead of time around just how do you effectively communicate the resources that are available to communities. And one of the things that you mentioned is that part of the way you all are trying to support that is put out a call for more content strategists to support for some of that work. Are there other ways that you're seeing that have been effective from a tech and digital services perspective around communication of the myriad of available resources now?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've heard a lot of too is I don't think people actually want to reinvent the wheel here, right? Most of the time they want to find something that works, that it's been vetted by experts. And so I think that we're seeing is like when we find something that works well, that maybe has very good scientifically accurate information or is kind of modular, we're really trying to amplify those tools. So another example is there's a website that New Jersey built called Ask a Scientist, and they worked with the Federation of American Scientists. So you have great experts in there to answer a bunch of the common questions around the coronavirus. And that's an example where that's content that everyone can use. And so we're trying to help people reuse or leverage existing content where we can. Yeah.
Great, thanks. It was another question just generally around data and privacy. As you all engage with a lot of governments and a lot of related efforts, there is a need for, and as we talk about public health, there's probably a lot of information that is sensitive about people's health, economic situation, and the like. How are you all thinking about privacy and data sharing, particularly as you partner with local government?
Yeah, I think this is something we talk about a lot. It's a really important question. So there's a couple things we do. We do publish a kind of software and data guidelines document on our GitHub repository, which people can read. But in short, I think there's different kinds. So in one case, a lot of the dashboards and tools we build are actually made from public information. So COVID Act Now, for example, is I think primarily built from public data sources around COVID cases and modeling. So that's in some ways simpler in that it's public information and we're really just helping it, making it more actionable and accessible. In another case, it might be, we actually really try to work with the governments to have the government's groups actually retain access to that information. So with Neighbor Express, the volunteer matching service I mentioned, that is a system where we actually don't actually have access to that information, the data, after we set it up. So our ideal case is we help a city set up the system to start with, but when we're done sort of setting up the tools, we sort of give all the data access back to the city officials because we think they're the ones who really should be managing that database of volunteers and residents. So that's another common approach that we're taking.
Got it. Thank you. We had one question both ahead of time, and I saw someone asked a similar question in the chat box there. So it was a question around how how are you working with local governments to ensure that folks who, maybe English as a second language, that they have access to a lot of the same information and getting those similar resources in front of them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think so many cities, it's natural to have to be featured in multiple languages. So there's a few things. I think we do look to our city partners to tell us. So it's, they will communicate with us. As I gave the example with City of Concord, they'll just kind of say, hey, we really need this to work in multiple languages, and here are the languages. So we do listen and really try to respond to that. On our side, we have a lot of resources at this point, either ones that our own volunteers are familiar with using, or actually there's a few other third-party resources that help translate content pretty quickly and help get that onto the website. So I think as long as people are clear about what languages they need to communicate the information in, we can certainly help getting that translated content live.
Okay, well, thank you. Can you say a little bit, and you talked about this before, about the different phases that you can begin working with a government partner, but I'd imagine a lot of our city partners are curious on what idea is too big or too small to approach you all with. Do they have to have a certain set of things in place ahead of time that would make them an ideal partner for you all, or if they have an idea, is that enough to reach out and say, hey, we were thinking about this? And then, sorry, one more piece to that. Is there a particular partner within local government that you look to work with? Are you open to, could it be somebody in the Parks and Rec department, or do they have to be in the chief data officer shop, or are you open across the board there?
Yeah, in general, so I would say in general, we're open in the sense that we're really here to help any government group who needs help, especially if it's specifically related to the COVID-19 response. So I think that it's not necessarily the time to just generally refresh your digital systems. I think we are really targeted at helping with the response, but that means a lot of things, right? So the example I gave with the city just digitizing their HR and finance processes is not necessarily specifically Corona related, but it's becoming something it's raised in importance because of the current crisis. I think we're at the point where don't self-censor. Like, we'd rather hear from you if you need help, and we can help you assess whether you need help. But I think what has made for better partnerships, one is definitely responsiveness. Like, I think, we are really trying to assign people who will kind of be in touch with you and talk to you, but we need to have that back and forth conversation. So I think the best relationships we've had are ones where the government partner is really eager to kind of collaborate and share things back and forth. And we might share a tool and they give feedback. And I think that iteration is super helpful. I think certainly, in some cases, I think it's easier to embed volunteers directly into innovation and kind of data and digital teams, just because they sort of have the similar skill set and it's more like a embedding. But we've worked with departments, all kinds of departments. So it really, I would say, if in doubt, feel free to ask, and we can always give you feedback on what kinds of things we can help with.
Got it. No, great. Thank you. We had one question here from the chat box. Can you say a little bit more about how you all are partnering with others who are trying to support cities so as not to duplicate efforts? I'm sure, you've seen, I've seen, there are a lot of, emergent resources, emergent volunteer support that is coming online to try to support, local governments and I think civil society more broadly. Can you just say a little bit more about how you all have partnered with others to date and how you hope to do so moving forward?
Yeah, I think, a big reason we came into existence was more to help fill gaps. So it's one of those things where every time I find out of another group doing something great, I'm delighted. I'm great. Okay, now we know where to redirect requests if they come up. So we're very open. I think if you know of any other groups or you feel like we're duplicating work with others, just let us know. And I think we really want to collaborate. So in some cases, I would say we have redirected help and said, hey, we know this other org, they can help you. And in other cases, we've actually partnered with the other org because they themselves might need more help. So that's what we're doing. And I think this example just, thank you, Clarence, for kind of inviting us here, where I think we're trying to work with groups like What Works Cities and other kind of broader groups where you're actually working with multiple government, in touch with multiple governments at once. So yeah, we're really here to help fill in gaps. If And anytime we hear about something, we really try to adjust what we're doing to reflect, I would say, overall increasing our impact.
Great, no, thank you. So we had another question here, and I had one that I think relates to this. So one is, what do you hope will happen to this capacity in the professional community when this emergency ends? And so a related question that I had is just, how long do you all plan to be around? You know, and you know, how long should people keep you in mind for projects that they may need support with? And you know, I guess maybe this follow-on question to that is, you know, are there projects that you all might be wary of taking on because you think the duration may be too long?
It's a great question. I mean, it's a hard question. In some ways, we don't know. We're like a 3.5-week old organization. I would say we are, yeah. I think we're certainly committed to helping like through the crisis, which is hard to describe. But I would say, you know, so just to share, everyone's a volunteer right now. So several people, many people have full-time other jobs, but others are also in between jobs and have made this their full-time work, myself included. So I think, you know, we are not going to disappear overnight. And I think we're committed at least through, you know, the kind of next few months to like see what we can do. The other thing is we haven't shied away from taking on bigger things. And part of the reason for that is we have this open source approach, we have kind of this modular approach, and we're trying to collaborate. So if we hear of a big, hairy problem, we don't say, hey, that seems too big for us to work on. Instead, we actually try to figure out, are there other people already working on it that we can partner with? If we were to take it on, can we open source it? Can we have it? Is there some sustainable ownership path? So that's been our approach. But as I mentioned, because it's focused on coronavirus response, I think if it ends up saying, you know, like one example is, I think we're better suited to help someone with PUA or like an influx of applications for UI. We're probably not the right people to say, hey, let's redesign your entire benefit system because it's overdue for, you know, a rewrite or something like that.
Got you, thanks. And I think, so there's a question here, it looks like Corey answered it, but just want to elevate for others. And it was a question around, are volunteers available during typical work hours to engage on projects? Yeah,
so also what's very special, I think, about our volunteer database, or people have raised their hands, is they've been very giving with like just when they're free or not. So I would say it runs the gamut. I think what we've had is we just, you know, it depends on what the government partner needs. So in some cases, the government partner is like, hey, we really need someone to like basically be full-time for 1 week during like Eastern time zone, right? Then we will actually find someone who meets that criteria. In other cases, they've been okay with someone who's free like Thursday night through Monday morning, and then we can find volunteers to do that. So we have people who fit all profiles and members of the core team. So a lot of people that are especially like doing a lot of the intake calls, a lot of them are full-time and available like all day during the week.
Great, thanks. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, I know you all you endeavor to work with government at local, state, and federal level, and have kind of that's your orientation as government in this case. And I know we're here today to primarily talk about local government. But can you maybe say a little bit about if you've seen projects yet that have touched on where you have a team that has to do some coordination across, you know, a couple levels of government, whether that's, you know, local and county or engagement with the state as well around data sharing and the like?
Yeah, I think, so I think this is one where it's maybe less us directly, and it's more like we might be helping teams that are having that integrated kind of those relationships. So I think the Pennsylvania example with the healthcare system data is a good example, where you have hospitals at different levels. They're kind of aggregating on a county level, but the overall dashboard is really for the state. So we're helping the state team kind of coordinate across all those levels, but that certainly is kind of cutting across the whole state. And yeah, I think that's probably a good example. I think benefits will certainly be one where, like the benefits wizard, I think I saw it go by in chat too. That's going to be relevant for all levels, I'd say, because, you know, there are certain systems where the counties might be owning the benefits, some of the cities, some of the state. So we're just trying to make it available to all, and we're happy to kind of collaborate as needed.
Got you. And maybe this is a related question. I think someone's put in the chat earlier, they were interested in trying to access unemployment filing data at the city level. Is that something you all could support with? Have thoughts on that? Should they just follow up to the team about that?
That's probably worth a follow-up just because I probably need more context, and we have a team on it. So please reach out, whoever that was.
Okay, great. A question about volunteers and background screening. Is there a vetting process for folks coming in the door with you all, or will that be the responsibility of the local government partners?
So I would say we definitely do. So Corey answered, but I'll kind of add a little more. So we certainly do some like vetting on our side in the sense of we have a volunteer oath. We talk to each person. We have like kind of a code of conduct. We really ask people to come in with, they're focused on, it's a volunteer effort. They're focused on doing what's necessary, like not doing it in personal and professional interests. That said, we do say, like, if you are a government group and you're looking for help of a certain flavor, or you need to do your own background checks or your own NDAs, we leave that to you. And I think I just want to emphasize, like, we are not going to provide like what everyone needs. So, and we have seen in some cases, like one example is we had one city where they needed the volunteer to physically go in to kind of like sign some paperwork or kind of like, set themselves up. And we were like, we just asked the volunteer, hey, you've onboarded through us, but in order to work with this one partner, you need to go physically into their office to sign up. And we leave that up to you. And that's a personal decision, right? In this case, it was great. And the person went like I think the next day to sign up to help. So it's kind of a successful match, but that's just an example where I think the cities should really customize what they really require.
Great, thank you for that. So I just put in the chat box. I think we have about 5 more minutes left for the folks have additional questions. I'll ask one in the meantime. Just you've been engaged with this work for it sounds like a few weeks now. Can you say just maybe what surprised you so far about the work, whether it's something you thought that cities or government may not have needed help with, that you saw there was a lot of help, or maybe it was a place where you were surprised by how well functioning something already was?
Yeah, I think the overall feeling, and not from like a surprise in that I didn't think it was this way, I just was not very familiar with it. The overall thing I've had is just how collaborative and action oriented everyone is. I think everyone really is trying to like be effective, get their work done. And like, it's a lot, like in some cases where I described digitizing their whole workflows or introducing new tools, like people are just really on board to like learn new tools and see what works in the name of like getting more done. And so I think that's been very fun. And, half of our team, I mentioned this, and we may kind of alluded to this, like half the team has government experience, but half has none. And so I think we're an interesting like mixing of worlds. And I think it's just been really refreshing to kind of partner, and everyone's just running very quickly. So I think that's one. And I think the other, maybe surprise, not surprise, but just, I think the work that we can do is for really understandable reasons. A lot of systems just weren't designed to take this kind of load, right? So if you are used to getting, 50 forms a year and you have 50,000 in a week, like naturally things aren't just going to scale that easily. And so I think that's not a surprise, but I just think everyone's sort of realizing where a lot of those brittle points were. And we're just trying to help like fix them as quickly as we can.
Yeah, I guess to that, have you seen places thus far where you've encountered, policy hurdles that you have either kind of real time needed to be set aside or reimagined? And I'm thinking a lot, particularly on like access to benefits, where there's a lot of places where you still need to submit forms in person, or there's a interview that's supposed to occur in person to access these benefits that just aren't feasible right now, but it may be the law ordinance that's on the books. Can you say a little bit more? Have you seen that thus far, and have you all been in a space where you've had to help cities or state governments navigate that?
I think there are certainly requirements like that, and I would say we're not quite yet there in the like arc of our help. I think that's something that's been coming up. It also is relevant, I think, to a lot of the federal stimulus packages, where a lot of the attention of those benefits is to like get them to more people. So I wouldn't be surprised if there ends up being some loosening of requirements or even standardization, at least for federal ones. But but it's something that I think we're still kind of scratching the surface on.
Okay. Great, thank you so much, Raylene. I think we were going to move on to wrap this up and maybe give folks a few minutes back on their Friday. But just as a last push, it's right. Folks should go to the usdigitalresponse.org/governments to submit projects and express interest around this. Right. I'm getting ahead now, so that's good. So just as a matter of wrapping up a little bit, just. Hey, wanted to bring your attention. There's I see it in my inbox constantly. I know there are a wealth of resources being generated across a ton of different entities these days. And just wanted to bring folks' attention to two efforts that are trying to do some, to collate some of those resources and centralize them in a place for, if you're interested, you can have just a few places to go to try to find what you're looking for. And so one I'll point you to is our What Works Cities, our local government response and resource bank, where we're just trying, as we see things, articles of the like, we're trying to surface them for what other cities and communities are doing. And so we'll share that link with you all as a follow-up to this. You can also see that on our Medium page. But then also I would like to, we have Stacy Richardson with us, who is the Program Director of Urban Innovation with the City Solutions team at the National League of Cities. And would ask Stacy to just maybe say a few words about the work that National League of Cities is doing around COVID-19 response, in particular the local action tracker.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Clarence. And to What Works Cities, thank you so much for having the League of Cities here to join today. As you said, we've been working diligently to provide resources to our members and to cities across the country at this time. We know local leaders are really on the front lines, and they're creating really innovative solutions to help slow the spread, flatten the curve, and ultimately protect their communities. So as part of this effort, NLC has launched a new microsite that houses all of our resources. You can find that at covid19.nlc.org. A major component of those resources is the local action tracker that we have created in partnership with Bloomberg Philanthropies. At my latest count, the action tracker had over 750 entries with unique actions that local leaders have taken. This can be searched and filtered by date, geography, population impacted, type of action. It can also be downloaded and used for whatever purposes are helpful to local leaders. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the tracker. It's populated by the cities themselves, in addition to NLC staff doing desk research. So feel free to go on and upload your own actions that are happening in your communities. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.
Great, thanks so much, Stacey. And again, we'll share those resources with folks as a follow-up for everyone who registered for this webinar. And then so on the other piece, I just wanted to reiterate, this is the first in what we hope to be a series of learning opportunities for cities and folks in our broader What Works Cities community. And so we will be sharing out a calendar of some of these other opportunities, both across the partners that I listed earlier on the slide there, but also external partners like the U.S. Digital Response folks who were gracious enough to spend some time with us in our community today. So please be on the lookout for that as well. So with that, on this Friday afternoon, this Good Friday, I'm going to give folks a little bit of time back. We really appreciate you spending this Friday with us. You know, feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions at info@whatworkscities.org. Again, I just want to really thank the U.S. Digital Response folks, Raylene Young, Stacy Richardson, and the National League of Cities team for spending the time and investing the resources to both the resources in terms of implementation, but also spending the time with us today to just share more about this in a what is a trying time for a lot of us, but hopefully, you know, we can band together and get through this. So thank you, everyone, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.